This is Birthing at Home, a podcast. I'm Elsie, your host. I'm a home birth mum of 2 little boys, a doula in Melbourne supporting birth at home. I'm a mental health nurse and the co-creator of Homebirth Victoria. If you want to learn more about me, the podcast, or my work as a doula, check out www.birthingathome.com.au. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people who are the traditional custodians of the land I'm recording on in Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. I would also like to acknowledge that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have been birthing at home on country for tens of thousands of years prior to the British invasion and acknowledge that sovereignty has never been ceded. This is the 62nd episode and it's shared today by mum of 3, Mel from Newcastle, who shares her incredible stories with having 2 babies after 42 weeks and planning 3 home births through the publicly funded system. Mel chose to have a publicly funded home birth with her first baby, but at 42 weeks she was coerced into an induction due to the criteria of the program. After a 5-day induction, Oscar was born. For her second baby, she planned another home birth with the publicly funded program. However, at 41 plus 2, her baby girl Zara arrived before the midwives did, in a fantastic unassisted home birth. For her third baby, after choosing the publicly funded home birth program, as the clock ticked past that arbitrary cutoff once again, Mel connected with a privately practicing midwife and she was supported to have a fantastic home birth just 4 days later. This also happened to be on her mum's birthday, who passed away the year before. I'm so grateful for Mel, who recorded with me when Archie was only 5.5 weeks old. I know these stories will mean a lot to so many listeners. As we talk about in the episode, going past 42 weeks is a rarity these days, so please make sure to share the episode in whatever way you can. Enjoy. Welcome, Mel, to Birthing at Home, a podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me. Do you want to give a little bit of background to who you are, Mel, who's in your family, where you're located, that type of thing?
Sure. So I have a family of 5 now. So I've got, I live in Newcastle and I've got 3 kids. So I've got Oscar, who's 5, Zara, who's 2, and then now Archie, who's about 5.5 weeks.
Yeah, amazing. And just a bit of context, for the listeners, I reached out to Mel with some pictures and story that I saw about Archie recently because you were in a publicly funded program.
Yes.
Yeah, but then you went over the 42 weeks is my understanding.
Yes.
And I thought that would be a really interesting story. But then, also found out that you planned a home birth with Oscar, who's 5, and then you had a home birth with Zara, who's 2. So home birth mum.
Yes, yeah. Planned it from the start. Just didn't always happen that way.
Yeah. I suppose to start off with, because three planned home births, like that's not super common these days. How did you find out about home birth?
It's a good question. I was thinking about this the other day. I think one of my good friends went through the publicly funded hospital that you were talking about, and she had a home birth, and that was probably the first I'd been exposed to, as in like in a close capacity. I guess before that I didn't really know anything about home births and probably thought it was very rare and didn't have any experience around it, and everyone else that I knew and all my other friendship group all went through hospital systems. So then it got me to look, because we're quite like-minded in that way, so then it encouraged me to look into it when I fell pregnant with my first. And asked her all about it, and just, she had such a positive experience, and then she had a circle of friends that were all similar, like all planned home births as well. So it just got me exploring. And then I think originally it was kind of like, oh yeah, I like the idea that you can kind of have it in hospital there if you want, or you can. And so I think more so I was going for the non-intervention pathway, not necessarily thinking home birth. And then when I first got assigned my midwife, she started talking more about home births and how really like it's less disruption at home than going into their birth suites. And so then it swung around that way. So we didn't go into it actually. I'm remembering this now. We didn't go into it thinking we're having a home birth. We just wanted more like a low intervention.
Yeah.
And I was pretty confident with like the non-medicated side of things, which is what this hospital offers. Like you don't have, there's no doctors on site kind of thing.
Yeah. And so growing up, do you remember like knowing about home birth or like anything
not
like
at
that?
all. I honestly reckon, I can't even think. I think it was just one of those things that it seemed like just really alternate people had home births and really unheard of. And I feel like any time there was talk of home birth, it was like a very like stereotypical, like stigmatized kind of thought process with everyone that I knew. Like no one ever talked about it from an experience of knowing someone that had one or anything like that growing up. So
yeah. So that's quite amazing that you happen to have a publicly funded home birth program in the area that you are. Do you like remember, I suppose, how you got into that? Like, did you have to get referred from the GP or like did you just contact them or?
I remember, I do remember because I was at work and thinking, I need to call them because I knew that they like the group practice for midwives generally is like can be hard to get into, or I'd heard that. And so I was a bit like, I need to be really urgent with this. And I think I thought I had to wait till the 12-week mark. So I think I waited till like I was pretty much on 12 weeks and then called them. And I remember calling a few times and it was hard to kind of get through to them. And then got onto them and just got assigned a midwife that way. And then found out after that you can kind of call from pretty early on. So, so I was lucky they had availability when I needed them and I didn't have any issues that way, which was handy.
Yeah. And so you were saying just before that Oscar ended up being born in hospital and part of that was because he was born after 42 weeks.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Did you do you remember, obviously, 5 years ago is a little bit of time ago, but do you remember like having any particular thoughts about the exclusion inclusion criteria? Like did that like play on your mind at all or?
Honestly, I had no idea. And I think I was really thrown. I think the other thing too that went with the group midwife practice was the idea that you get the one midwife that carries through your whole pregnancy. So that was something that I really found valuable rather than just kind of getting random people. And so, so when I had my midwife, it got up until like, I reckon it was either 40 or 41 weeks that I still had no idea that it was really a thing, or it hadn't really been like talked about until it got to that end point. And then I remember my midwife saying at the 41 week appointment with her, like she came to my house for visits and she was like, okay, so your next visit at 42 weeks will actually be at like the John Hunter Hospital, which is like our local, just big public hospital.
Yeah.
And she did kind of just say, they'll be pretty like, just like they will try to push you into the induction process. Remember that you can say no, that kind of thing. But it was like still very like generalized. Like I didn't, And then I think.
So you feel like it wasn't like explicitly clear that home birth will be off the table after 42 weeks?
I think at that point, that was when we must have had a discussion. I don't really remember, but I think it was kind of like, I'm sure maybe along the way it was like, after 42 weeks you get changed over to John Hunter.
Yeah.
But I don't think it was ever explicitly talked about, and whether it was kind of vaguely mentioned, and I just never really thought about it because I just hadn't really heard of anyone else going through that problem, being faced with that issue. But I definitely don't remember any conversations where we had to be like, until the very last minute of being actually completely changed over in care providers.
Yeah.
And I think I even thought, like, after going to the 42-week appointment, that I could still just kind of come home, like, they would be kind of persuasive in trying to get me to start the induction process, but I could just kind of be like, no, I'm good, thank you, and then just come home and then still kind of go with it. And then I do remember, I don't know, it must have been a few days before it, and I do remember like after that appointment coming home and knowing it was the eve of 42 weeks, and if I didn't have a baby that night, I couldn't have a home birth. But then I think I still kind of thought that I was like still kind of supported by my original midwife from there, and not really realizing that it was like completely like, oh no, our care ends here. Like,
wow. So after when that switched into hospital, then you lose the continuity midwife as well.
Yes.
Holy
completely.
Moly,
Yeah. So they pretty much, and I think it sounds like my understanding is that they just, like it was just like, okay, you're in their hands now, we're out. So that really threw me because as I say, it was kind of the eve of 42 weeks that I was just like, all of a sudden, like, hang on a minute. And I didn't really get any check-ins or anything. I maybe got a text or something from my midwife, but that's just her kind of personally willing to reach out, but it was nothing to do with literally your care ends there at 42 weeks. Yeah.
I now that you're saying it, like because my first Murphy, who was born in April 2020, I had a private midwife, but they had visiting rights in a hospital. But I actually, I'm trying to think, like, I don't think that it was explicitly stated to me, at least that I remember, that part of accepting that option was that after 42 weeks, they wouldn't support me at home. They would be able to support me in the hospital where they had the visiting rights. But so I ended up paying Murphy, at 41 plus 5 at home. But it was so stressful. I can't imagine, like, in your position though, like having to also change the complete care providers. Like, that's crazy.
It was really, I think I just never knew that. I just never thought about having a deadline. Like I knew that people get induced. I knew about inductions, and I knew that, like, it was common for the main hospital here to do inductions, like push them from about, I think definitely from 41 weeks.
Yeah.
But I definitely just didn't. I think in my mind it was just like, oh, this is my home birth ended. Yeah. And then I think I just kind of thought, oh, now I just kind of turn into the other system and I'll, labour at home and kind of go from there. But, no, definitely the deadlines definitely weren't emphasised until that very last minute. And then it's just,
almost literally.
So it was really heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I remember being so heartbroken.
What was your labour and birth like with Oscar? Like, how many weeks were you when you actually went into labour?
So what happened was I went to that 42-week appointment at the John Hunter Hospital, and I basically, like, I did like a scan, did all the things just to check everything. Everything was all like noted as fine. Still had plenty of fluid around it, all that kind of thing. And but then they were like, okay, because you are 42 weeks, we want you to start your induction like ASAP. Do you know all the risks? And it was like straight away, like so much talk on like stillbirths and like how risky it was that I was here at 42 weeks and hadn't been induced yet. So that was also really like, because I just kind of thought it was a checkup appointment, and then like, they'd say, this is the time that we encourage inductions, but it was so much more than that. Like, and it was to the point that we had a doctor come in, talk to us about all those risks, saying like, stillbirth risks have increased rapidly, all these kind of things. And then we were like, okay, but you just did all these tests and everything was fine. So, and then she ended up like saying, well, if you're not going to stay here now for induction process, I'm going to have to go get like a senior doctor or someone else that was there, and brought them in, and who also did the same big like speech. And so we had both of them like in this little room, just like Brad and I, my husband, and and it was so overwhelming and so confronting, because obviously like we'd never had a baby before, so we like all that talk was kind of like really full on. Yeah. But just like how I was like, I'm not going to just stay in here now. I'm not ready to just be induced this afternoon, and we kind of talked about it because I was like, can you do, I knew about Cervidil and I'd heard like you used to be able to do the tape thing and go home. And I was like, oh, is that still, like if I was to get that tape, does that mean I go home tonight? And still, and they're like, no, that's all changed. Like once you start getting the induction process, you're in here, that's until you have your baby. Anyway, so it took a lot of persuading, and I felt like for us, like to be like, no, we're okay, just to go home that night. And I just ended up agreeing to, I said, can I just go home tonight because I'm not quite at that. I think I must have been like 41 and 5, or maybe it was 42, but like I think I thought I had until midnight to go into labor, and then before the other hospital cut me off.
Yeah.
So I think I was like, no, I just want to go home today. And if, nothing happens overnight, then I'll come back tomorrow and then potentially start the process. And they were like, look, you'll have a baby by Wednesday. And this was on a Sunday.
Yeah.
And I think they said that, if I'd got induced on the Monday, we'd have our baby by Wednesday, blah, blah, blah. And so we went home, and I was just like, I just remember being so upset, and I felt so, I was really annoyed, but I was also really like, I'm one of those people that like to please everyone. So I felt like I was in trouble. I felt like I'd just been scolded by the principal for like not having a baby yet and not forcing it out yet.
Yeah, especially when they bring in the big guns, like they bring in like the senior obstetrician. That's
we were there for a few hours.
Coercion. Have they heard of the word coercion?
Yes, it was so full on, and like obviously first time parents too. Like I don't know. Like, and I think in hindsight, I wish that even my midwife that I had still kind of technically could have come to that appointment. Also, we just felt so like backed into a corner with no one helping support us except for us who didn't really have much knowledge or experience, but just knew that I was like, I feel really comfortable. I didn't feel like I need to get this baby out of me. And also I was doing a lot of safe things of like, I was letting them do all these scans and checks, and they were telling me everything was perfect. So I just felt really like it was just really conflicting. So I'm like, why am I being made to feel like I'm being a really bad mum, or like, doing something wrong when everything else is showing that everything's fine. And we came home and just sat in the lounge room that night, and it had like the fairy lights and everything set up because it like the Homebirth space, and I just like sat there just so sad. I'm like, and so I think it all kind of came to a head on that day. That was when the gravity of the whole this is it now situation really unfolded.
Wow. And so did you end up agreeing to the induction thing?
So then the next day, we like packed a bag for me and went in on that Monday. And then it was just like so we went on the Monday. I think I got the Cervidil, like the tape thing on that Monday. And then I had to stay in hospital from then. And I remember like each day that passed or whatever, I was like, I immediately that night, I think it was, or it could have been, maybe it was either that night or the second day I ended up getting those, how do I write down? So I always get those ball things, like the cervical balloon wrapping catheter.
Yeah.
I got them the next day because like the first process didn't really work.
Yeah.
And then, and I remember all of a sudden getting like really bad back pain. And so I wasn't sleeping because I was like in such pain. And so I was in a shared room with all these mums that had just given birth. So that was already a thing. And then I just kept going into the shower, which is also shared, like, public showers, and just like hammering the hot water on my back. So I was just like in so much pain. So my assumption is that once they started the process, it was like he rotated and like went the spine to spine or whatever you call it.
Yeah, OP, yeah.
And so then this was the Tuesday when I got those ball things. The Wednesday they were like, we're going to break your waters. And then the hospital was just like so inundated. They were so busy. It was just like, I remember each day they'd kind of give us a time, and then it'd end up being like 3-4 hours after that time. So Brad would like, race there to be with me, and then we'd just be sitting around like waiting all day. And so on this Wednesday, they were like I remember it being so early. It was like, say like 7 a.m. we're going to break your water. So Brad like shot there, got up really early. And then it got to, I think it was evening. It was like, say like 6 p.m. at night, my waters ended up breaking themselves because we were just waiting that whole day in this like, in this birth suite room, and we were like freezing. Had all this back pain. I was doing laps of that. I remember just being like, I'm so determined that this baby's just going to like, I was doing laps around the hospital and they kept being like, just like, lay down in the bed and rest. And I was like, no, I'm going to, like I was doing all the like ball rotations and everything. Just like, I'm going to move this thing along as much as I can help. But yeah, so it got to the Thursday. I don't even know what we did, but nothing happened. Oh, I think I think they started doing the drip on the Thursday. And then I think that Wednesday when my waters broke, they were kind of like, oh, well, that's handy because that means you can actually stay in the birth suite now. Otherwise, they were going to send me back to the shared room again.
Oh, my goodness.
And they were like, Brad can stay too. And so he like stayed on this little mattress on the ground that they pulled together. And we were so cold. Like it was like just crazy cold aircon. And they had told us originally that we're having a baby by Wednesday.
Yeah.
So I feel like each day Brad just had to keep bringing me more things.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and we were just like, and because it was so hot outside, Brad like came in shirt and boardies, and then he was like had this little hospital blanket and just sleeping on the floor. And then, so I think the Thursday was just like a day spent of like getting contractions but still like nothing substantial, and then just like spending the day amping it up. And then I didn't end up having him till I think it was 12:10 or something. So technically he came on the Friday. So I was in there from Monday till Friday.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I don't know. To me, I'm just like, this is just this reassertion that this baby wasn't ready. My body wasn't ready. And then also because he'd rotated, he just like, nothing, like the drip and everything just wasn't helping. Like my contractions just weren't helping him move down or anything because he was so like wedged in the end.
Yeah.
And then that led to an epidural, which I held off on for so long. And then they got to the point they were like, come on, like you've been here for days. Like you need to just like, nothing's progressing. And they did like a manual rotation.
Wow. Holy moly.
Yeah. And so then I remember having the last little bit of, they came in doing the whole like, okay, it's been like an hour of pushing or whatever, and if you don't have this baby in the next 10 minutes, and they'd already like told Brad that like most likely I was going to end up having a cesarean. And I was just like, it's not happening. So I was just like, and I couldn't feel a thing with this silly epidural. It's like, I don't know why people like them, but I was just like, felt like my eyes were popping out of my head, and like, it's like my head was going to blow off because I was just like trying to push so hard, but I couldn't feel the rest of my body. And I was like, and I don't know, maybe it's just like a stronger dose, or maybe my body just didn't take it as well, because I've heard of people just being able to like stand up and stuff still in epidural, but I was like, could not even like put any weight on a leg or anything. Like I was just like like I just felt like I was just numb from like my chest down. I couldn't feel or control anything. So yeah, pushing for like an hour and like not being able to feel a contraction and just being told like push now, and I'd be like there just trying so hard. I honestly thought I was going to get like a blood blister in my eye or something from pushing.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, so I gratefully avoided cesarean, and I avoided any other like episiotomies and all that kind of thing, and ended up having him vaginally, which I was just like, that was just like my big win for me, because I was like, I was aware that induction processes can, lead one thing to the other. So every step of it just really frustrated me, because I just was really like, again, I just felt like I was backed into a corner and was just going with it because that's what, and I was being as active in things as I could do, but also just feeling like I had no choice. Like I just was like, here I am in this. And
especially like looking like what you can look back now, having had Archie as well. How many weeks was Zara born? When was she?
So Zara was 41 and 2.
Yeah. And so then Archie also, like, it just, I mean, it's just wild that how much resources did they put into that whole process when you could have just been chilling at home, you'd accept it, like.
I could have just been going about my day. For sure. And in the end, like Oscar was like, it must have been 42 and 4, I think, which is exactly what Archie was. And like, I just reflect and go like, it's just so crazy that like I had, 4 days or whatever of trying to force this baby out when, as you say, I could have just been living life normally and then just let him come in his own terms.
But also that, it's such a huge issue, obviously, that like not all women have the same availability of like choices, like in public, if you can't afford a private midwife, or you don't know that there's really a difference, or like, even some private midwife, like, private independent quotation marks, like they have their own limits and whatnot. But like if you don't know these little subtle differences, then because like some private midwives go beyond 42. I supported a mum earlier this year that she went to, first time mum, she went to 42 plus 4 home birth. But like, not everyone can pay for a private midwife. It's like so problematic. But anyway. And so after you had Oscar, do you remember what your mindset was in terms of like home birth for Zara?
I felt really deflated after Oscar's birth, because I think a big one was because I really wanted to support home births, and I felt really deflated that I couldn't achieve that. And then to all the people around me, including our family, they all just thought we were crazy to want a home birth. And I think we actually hid it from them. We were talking about this just before Archie, because we had a birth pool and we had to because we live really close to our parents. Like my dad lives just up the road, or my parents live just up the road. Brad's parents live next door, and so it's like lots of pop-ins and things like that. So we had to hide this birth pool until the very because we were just imagine if they walk in and there's just this pool in the living room, how are we going to explain that? So we completely hid it from them.
Oh my goodness.
And then we had fairy lights up, and we were just because he was January, so I think we were just we've just kind of left them up from Christmas. So it was we were reflecting on this the other day. We were I've forgotten how much, which is cool in that transition. And I can kind of get to that once we get to Archie's birth. But started with they would have absolutely freaked out. And my mum they were already stressed about going through Belmont, I think, which is, the hospital that we went through that had the group midwifery practice that do the, no intervention or that kind of thing. They're already I remember my mum being Mel, drugs is what gets you through the birth and stuff. And I'm no, I don't want that. I want to be able to have a natural birth, and just kept having to reassure them that, if anything does happen, it's a 10-minute ambulance ride to the other big hospital with the doctors if need be. So it was already so kind of unheard of that we were just going through a midwifery practice with no doctors. And I remember my mum offering to pay for private hospital and stuff. She was if that's what you're worried about, I'll pay for it.
Wow.
I was no, that's not what I'm worried about. I want to really I just want to be able to have a birth where I'm not getting drugs and, all that kind of stuff. So then I guess at the end of that process, I was did everyone else just kind of win? It was in my eyes, it's not a competition, but just more I couldn't even advocate for home births because I couldn't achieve one myself. And so I was really frustrated, and I was really frustrated with my body. I was why couldn't I just have a baby naturally? And so it really made me question my ability and all that kind of thing. So I guess it got to Zara, and we went through the same public midwifery group again. And then this time I decided to get a doula. And I thought, if this does kind of happen where we do end up being it does end up past 42 weeks, at least we have someone that can advocate and really make us feel safe and
provide that continuity, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And someone that knows us, and continuity. Exactly, because it felt last time we walked in to that hospital and all our support was behind us and behind those doors as they shut kind of thing. So it was definitely my thing, because I was like, you know, can you go to the hospital with us if that ends up happening? It was all that kind of like emotional support really. And I was really determined again to achieve a home birth. And then I think this time we didn't hide it as much, but we did actually. They knew that we were going through the same system, but COVID actually helped us because she was in like one of the last kind of bouts of COVID coming through, and so they were kind of saying, I think it was still like masks, and then it was like if you do have COVID, then you can't have your birth support partner. It was like that kind of era, which is putting a lot of like fear and like stress on, you know, pregnant mothers. And so then I remember that changing my mum's point of view, because she was like, oh yeah, like you wouldn't want to expose you or your baby to like, you know, all that hospital system with all the sickness and things going on in there. And I was like, yeah. And then kind of just like slowly started to be like, yeah. So then they've kind of said, maybe you're actually heaps safer to have it at home. So I went, even though all along I'd like planned to have a home birth, but it was like really actually helped us because, and then, so that helped us. That was the one perk of COVID. So we're like, you know, how much safer is it? We're free of germs, like, you know, they come to us and all that kind of thing. So, and then I guess, and then with her, we got to, I remember that day that I went into labour actually, Brad and I had a chat because it was like 41 and 2 and we were just like, oh, it must have been 41 and 1 maybe, because then we had a kind of in the night. I think we were 41 and 2 and we were kind of like, okay, what are we going to do here if we get to 42 again, because it's getting close now, like it's a few days away kind of thing. So I had that fear again, and I felt it a lot more earlier this time because I actually knew about it, whereas last time I obviously didn't know until the end. So it definitely like played on my mind most of the pregnancy. Do
you feel like that was your, especially because you'd like been bombarded at the end with Oscar about all of the risks of every, you know, possibility in birth?
All these endangering things.
Did you have like any fears around anything like that with Zara?
Definitely, like I would be lying if I didn't say that it, like I had clouded thoughts of like, I think still overriding was like I was just so determined to achieve a home birth. So I just really wanted to. And but I was definitely like, and I think like that with Oscar too, that I was like, you know, I joined like these Facebook groups that were like 42 and beyond. And like, you know, I was doing all this like little background thing to like, you know, reassure myself that like people do have later babies. Because I didn't know stories around me because everyone just gets induced, and my mum got induced with all like me and my 2 brothers. And so it was all like anyone knew was like, you go overdue, you get induced. So I definitely like, did a fair bit of like trying to find some stories that made me feel more confident. And like, there was definitely insecurities there. But I, felt better. It definitely helped having a doula with Zara, because now that I had that shrouded doubt of like, okay, what's going to happen here? And I really didn't want that induction process and stuff again. It really helped because she had experience with a laid out baby as well. And then also she had lots of experience of like, you know, being at lots of different births and all the different, so it was nice to kind of have that as backup. Because then I found even like, you know, the midwives that I, like the midwife program that I was with, like all they can really advocate for is knowing their babies up until 42 weeks really. So like they couldn't even like have much to offer me. So then
I wonder how many women get caught up in like that, because I find it, because here in Melbourne there's 4 publicly funded programs, and I think I've expressed some concern because I do Homebirth Victoria here, so I've expressed some concern with that continuity, because that's just mean. Like having the midwife and then 42 weeks it just stops and then you're like in this whole system. Like, I wonder who made that rule, because I feel like that's a really, really bad rule. Like,
yeah. And
I wonder, yeah.
And I think even this time my midwife was kind of like my midwives through the group practice was like, I think the rules just kind of changed again. Like, it was like, if you're not in active labour by midnight, of like your 42 weeks, or is it like, yeah, so like it was like, it's something like they're even bringing it forward a little bit to like really not allow you to be like over 42 at all. Yeah, so it's
That's crazy.
I think it's like, yeah, by midnight before you tick over to 42 weeks, it seems to be their cutoff now, rather than like, I think she was saying before, if you went into active labour before your appointment that was made on that 42-week day, you were still able to go through them, something like that. There's like this little. So anyway, say it's potentially taken away, 6 hours or so, which could still like.
Some women have their babies within 6 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that's
Oh
my gosh.
Yeah.
Did you do anything like different or additional apart from the doula, like between the pregnancies with Oscar and Zara?
As in, like, to try and move things along, like as
just in general, like during pregnancy.
I probably did more with Oscar, to be honest, as in, like, I was that first time pregnant mum that had time.
Yeah.
And so I was like aqua aerobics, and I think I did like prenatal Pilates.
Yeah.
Although I had never really thought of, and I did all the like natural induction methods, the dates, all that kind of stuff. But I do feel that I didn't ever really think of that thought. I just thought it was all like, to help have a better labour. I still never thought of like to make sure that you don't go over 42 weeks. I never had that thought.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't till the later ends that I remember my midwife was like, oh, have you heard about acupuncture? And so I went there at like maybe 40 or 41 weeks. And I remember the acupuncturist being like, this is pretty, like, who told you to come now? This is pretty late for like an induction process. Like, I'll do what I can, like amp it up. It must have been like, maybe that last week or so. So with Zara, I did acupuncture the whole way through. Yeah. And I did chiro the whole way through.
Yeah.
But I mainly also because I had sore hips with Oscar, and then I had a really sore pelvis with both Zara and Archie, and like a bit of the pubic symphysis kind of stuff. Yeah. So I mainly went for that. But then I also was like, I had a really good labour with like a good birth with Zara, that I was like, I'm going to try and do everything that I did with
copy
Zara for Archie.
Yeah.
So I did chiro acupuncture throughout the whole thing, but didn't do the exercise stuff through Zara. I think after I had a first child, any of my needs went out there.
Yeah. Of course.
My priorities weren't great.
And how did the labour start with Zara?
So Zara, I remember Brad and I had this conversation on the way to like see our nephew and his partner, and we were seeing them post-Christmas, and they were giving Oscar a present, and we were like just hanging down at the lake, and I remember just being like subtly in the back of my mind being like, I actually think I'm in early labour, because I felt like I had like the period kind of cramping.
Yeah.
And then it kind of like was like that throughout the day, and then I think I must have started getting some like contraction type feelings, just like sporadic as the day progressed. And we were up at mum and dad's, and I remember being like, oh, I reckon I could have a baby tonight. And they're like, oh, really? Like, a bit of a buzz. And I was like, yeah, maybe. And then they were also still really like, and this was the other thing about having later babies, is everyone around you is so scared and so worried. And there was already so many, like, I reckon even a week before it was like, oh, like, when are you going to go and get induced? Like, when's your end day? Like, what are they going to, like, let you go up until? Have you been checked? When's your latest check? Like, it's just so much, like, particularly with our family members. And it comes from a place of care, of course, but it was like so burdening. So I just kept being like, the baby will come when it's ready.
Yeah.
But then you still have like, it still gets you down because, again, I had those thoughts of like, you know, why don't my babies come just at a normal time? And like, why do I get all this extra pressure? And like, it just was really deflating.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then I gutter walked home thinking like, come on, let's just get this thing moving. Did a fair bit of gutter walking and
Nice.
yeah. And then we came home and like did what you do when you prepare for babies and did things like cleaned the house and all the necessary items. Brad went and mowed the lawn. And then it got to say like, I don't know, it was like 5 or 6 and this was in summer, so it was still really light. And I was like I had the contraction timer on and they were starting to get a bit more close together and a bit more like, like where they start to get a bit like, oh, yeah, okay, it's feeling pretty big now. And I remember Oscar climbing on my back, like when I was having contractions and stuff, like because we were just all, so the three of us were just home, yeah. And anyway, I was like, okay, I better get dinner sorted. We just literally had toasted sandwiches. And I think we knew by then that I was definitely in labor and things were happening. But then I think we also both had in our minds like this could, like I'm going to be laboring overnight and this could be a tomorrow thing, but like I am going into labor as we speak kind of thing. Yeah. So Brad was out mowing and then it got to a point where I waved him and I'm like, we need to get sorted. Like this is it's getting intense now. And like, I think the lawn can wait. And we still had Oscar there. So we're like, we need to sort him out and stuff. And so it was really handy in the way that it happened. So it was like 5 or 6 p.m. or whatever when I felt like it was really starting to ramp up and we were able to I remember offering, I said, I think Mummy's going to have a baby tonight. Would you want to be home for it or do you want to have a sleepover at Nan and Pop's? And he was like, sleepover. And he was like so excited. So I was kind of had that, in that like thing of like, do I want my child to like kind of be part of it in some way? But he was like so excited to have a sleepover. And I was like, Mummy might be noisy and loud and like, just want to let you know that I'm okay. But and he was like, I'll sleep over, like just nothing else in his mind. Then he was just excited to. So we packed him up and sent him off. Yeah. And then we just like, it was like I could just focus then too. And I was like, I just want a really easy watch movie on. I think we put Up on like one of those cartoons. Yeah. And Brad was just like laying on the couch.
Sad movie? Is the old man?
I think in hindsight it was, yes, but I wasn't focusing on it. I found it really comfortable to just be like, I think I was on my knees and like leaning over the lounge with my like elbows on the lounge. Yeah. And I feel like the contractions were really frequent from like probably from like 6-ish. And I think I just was like really I didn't watch much of the movie, that's for sure. But Brad got to just kind of lay there and we were just, just messaging the midwife and our doula, and they were just kind of like, oh yeah, like just, that sounds good. Like let us know if anything progresses, all that kind of thing. And then it got to, I think my doula was like, she was out for dinner and she'd made it closer to us because she was like meant to go maybe 20 minutes away or something. She was like, no, I'll move it down to where you guys are. And and then I think in hindsight, my doula now tells me that we were definitely downplaying. But I just was like, I hadn't felt contractions before. So I think I just was like, oh yeah, this is like the start game, but got heaps of time. And after Oscar's experience, I was like, this could be days. Yeah. And anyway, so she ended up coming over at like 9 p.m. I think Brad maybe sent her a screenshot of the contractions. And, and then she came and like they started to try and fill up the pool. And she got me to, I think she was like, so I was still in this like bent over position. I was doing like, sways and things like that, but I just really felt good being on that like, like that forward tilted position. Yeah. And, she, it was like, have you gone to the bathroom or like, gone for a walk in a while? And I was like, no. And like, got me to go to the toilet, and then I went to walk back out, and I think I must have had a few contractions in there, and my waters like just broke. And then I think it was like 20 minutes later, I went back to my position on the lounge with like leaning over, and they were still like madly trying to like fill this pool, and like I think in the meantime she was kind of like said to Brad like the pool's not happening. And I think I was fine. Like I don't know that I even would have ended up getting in the pool at that stage anyway, because I'd been in that like stance and I really felt comfortable in that position for so long. And she ended up birthing before the midwives actually got there.
Oh wow!
So it ended up being. So I think the active labor of like
that's so wild.
Yeah, so I actually still never have had a birth with the group practice. Like I realised after Archie, I was like, oh, still.
Because you could have done the exact same thing with Oscar if they weren't even there. Like,
yeah, I know. And so essentially
funny.
I kind of free birthed.
Yeah.
And it was just like the most wild experience. I just remember feeling like there's like a photo and I'm just like so, I just remember being so excited and so like happily shocked. And just I think because I also was like, oh, I didn't realize it was going to be within this day that I'd have this baby. So I think she came at like 10. I don't know. It was wild, and it stressed Brad out a little bit not having the midwives because, again, we hadn't had the experience of seeing a baby just kind of come out naturally through contractions and stuff. And so when her head came out and just kind of sat there for a minute, Sarah, my doula, was great. She like had seen it all before and she was like, yeah, like all fine. But and then when she just kind of like shot out on the next contraction, he still like kind of had a hand on my back and like one to kind of just like support her, but we didn't realize she just shoots out after that. So she just kind of went like plonk onto this like lounge cushion on the ground, and it was just all like so fast and in that like active stage. Yeah. And I guess not having the pool and like not feeling like, I guess he didn't really, none of us really realized that how progressed I really was. Yeah. But I loved that. Like I was like, that was cool. And then we were so stoked that night. We were like both on such a high because we just like climbed into our own bed and we're like, how nice is it not being in that freezing cold hospital? Like
sleeping on the floor.
Yeah. And Brad was like, I had to go home. Like he's like, I would be going home right now because I couldn't stay the night with you. Just so many opposites.
Sad. Yeah.
And I was like, it's so true. Like with Oscar too, he ended up swallowing meconium as he came out. And then in hindsight, I'm like learning more about meconium and later stage babies. I've learned that that's actually really normal for them to have those poos, which I thought, that was the reason but I think more so that he had such a strenuous week of trying to come out. He needed some oxygen and they took him to NICU. I was so deflated and tired on this. I remember just like being happy but not even being able to like keep my eyes open because I was just so exhausted and like also under the effects of the epidural, I guess. And so Brad went with Oscar to NICU and I was just like left in this birth suite, just laying there. Like I was like talking to my mum on Messenger or texting her or something. And then I just kind of fell asleep because I was like, I literally didn't have any energy left, which is weird to think that I wasn't even on a high enough to like push through that. But I was so out of it.
Yeah, but you had like other stuff like going on in your body as well. Like it just, like what a contrasting experience.
Yeah. And so like with Oscar, Brad went home that night, came back the next morning. It wasn't till like probably 9 a.m. because I couldn't even I remember just not even being able to walk. I was so like kind of butchered up and just swollen and sore, and I couldn't even like take myself to NICU to go actually see my baby properly. So it was probably like 9 a.m. or something the next day when I'd had him at 12 that we actually like went and saw him in NICU. And it's just like such a stark contrast to like that to Zara, like literally having her beside us in our bedroom. And just like going to sleep in our comfy bed. And even just after it, the magic part for me too was like after Zara, when I first birthed her, the midwives came say like 10 minutes later. So she was still like attached to the placenta. Yeah. And they came for like the birthing of that. And anyway, we were like, let's get my mum here and just
with Oscar.
No,
Oscar would have been
Oscar was with
asleep.
Brad's parents.
Yeah,
He was,
okay.
yeah. So
And he
then
would
my
probably
mum
been
was,
asleep. Yeah.
yeah. And so she took a while, and we were like, I think Brad just kind of said, "Oh, are you able to come and help?" And we just were like surprising her. So she knew that I was in labour, but just so she was like, I took time because I was there going like, what do I need? Like, I'm probably going to be there for hours. Like, I need a jumper. And like, she was like trying to think of like what she needed to bring down. And then, by the time she came, I ended up being like, they'd moved me to the toilet to like try and get this placenta moving along.
Yeah.
So mum came in just thinking she was there to like help me in labour, and I was like on my toilet holding Zara. And I was just like, hey, and she was so shocked, but it was so magical because like she came into this like peaceful, calm environment, and she was the person that had always been so scared of non-intervention births because of her experiences. And it was just such a game changer. And it was just, and then like a couple of hours, or she wouldn't let Dad come down until it was like not so, like she was like, Mel just needs to like clean up and all that kind of stuff. And then Dad came down too. So it was like,
wow.
Like midnight, 1 a.m. or whatever. And both my parents were sitting in our lounge room holding their new granddaughter.
You decide the visiting hours.
Yeah, and they were just like, we couldn't believe it. Just walking in, there was like, it was just like beautiful lighting. There was this pool that it wasn't filled up in the lounge room. Like, that's my dad's favorite part. He's like, just coming in and seeing this pool set up in your lounge room, like, So that was really cool. And so then, like after her birth, sitting there with the midwives, my parents, Brad, just all like sitting on the couch, like having a bit of food or whatever, and then it was just like, okay, everyone go home, and we went to bed, say like 2 or 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And people just left, and it was just so seamless, and not like, when are visiting hours, like when can we come and see you, and like, it was so much more detached being in the hospital.
Yeah.
And I felt so good. Like I bounced back so quickly.
Yeah.
I needed a stitch, but it wasn't anything crazy.
Yeah.
And I just felt like the recovery and everything was just so much quicker and nicer. And and like in the morning, Oscar was able to as I say, Brad's parents live next door. We really spread out over here. And so they were able to just like come over, and like Oscar was still in his pajamas and could just come and meet his baby sister, and we could just like kind of have breakfast and sit in the lounge room, and it's just so easy and calm. Not one of my our parents had to even get in a car. We all lived so close, so it was just so nice. So such a stark experience.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. It's so beautiful, but I just can't believe how. I mean, I can believe it, but it makes me sad that seemingly so many women think that that's just how it is. There's no other way, with Oscar, and like this had to happen and blah, 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 blah. But most women aren't even getting to 42 weeks anyway. They're having that induction talk like at 39 weeks,
for sure.
It's actually just quite sad. And so with Archie, did you, I guess off the back of Zara, and like, I guess with what I'm thinking of is that when I had Murphy, it was 41 plus 5. And then with Frankie, everyone said, like either the labor will be shorter or he'll come quicker, or, you hear all these stories and you have all these ideas about how it will play out. And so Frankie did come at like 40 plus 3, but I had prolonged rupture of membranes for 3 days, or almost 3 days. But like off the back of, now having Zara at 41 plus 2, what were your thoughts about Archie? Like, because you went into the same continuity program, yeah?
Yeah, I did. And I think in hindsight, I am kind of kicking myself for that. So I don't know. I think not really. Like I guess I still liked their system for its overall, like they, all the midwives there are great. They're all so good at their job. And I was like, Zara was earlier. So I think maybe it was more, I was lulled into that. If she was earlier, then potentially the next baby will be earlier, and surely not going to go past 42 weeks. And I don't think I don't know, like I think I had a little bit of thought to it, but it didn't feel like a big stress this time, and I actually thought that it would be, or maybe I talked myself into thinking that they always say that third births throw a spanner in the works, like they're always really different. Yeah, the wild card. Yeah. So I was like, my wild card's going to be that I'm going to go early.
Yeah, 37 weeks.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm going to work up until the end this time. It's just going to I'm just going to go to work one day and it'll just be like, oh, nope, sorry, in labor. Or like, I don't know. There's just all these, I think I was just kind of talking myself into it in hindsight.
Yeah.
But Brad and I both kind of talked ourselves into it in a way. And I mean, I was still also very aware of the fact that may not happen. But yeah, there were a few different things this time. Like my other two, I'm a teacher, so the other two were January and February, and I had the whole Christmas break off.
Yeah.
Prior to them, whereas Archie was he was due the holidays of term 3, and so I was working. I was like, oh, I may as well just work up until the end. And also, I made several jokes along the way, we all know he's not going to arrive till November. So, obviously I have time, so I'll work until the holidays. And I was due on, the first day of the school holidays. So I was like, due date to me means nothing. I probably still have weeks. But then also internally being surely not this time. And, and I felt physically even more I struggled this time. Just my pelvis, and felt, I guess everything sits a bit lower potentially, or maybe he just, I don't know, I just felt like he was sitting lower. And a lot of people towards the end, maybe from 37 weeks, were like, no, you're definitely sitting lower. So it's this is all great. Everything's setting itself up. And then, so I did go through the same care again, had a different midwife this time around. Because
were you tempted to go a different route? Obviously publicly funded, means you're not spending $6, $7, $8, sometimes $10,000 on, otherwise private midwives. Was that ever something that you pro-conned, or you just?
Yeah, I don't know why I didn't really think. I think I didn't know much about private midwives, and I think I'd looked up briefly before, and I think maybe cost was a bit of a factor. Yeah, because it was I had Zara for free. No, I guess in that. To put it frank. And I was if I I didn't, and I don't think I was really. I think if someone had told me that I was definitely going to have a later baby, then I would have thought more seriously about it. But I think, as I say, I just felt like I had a false sense of comfort. And I did get my same doula again, Sarah. Cool. So I guess I was like, no, that'll be my setup again. Yeah. That's my kind of backup if needed. And and I think, I didn't really know much about private midwives, and except for the cost really. And and then I think it wasn't till towards, I reckon I was in 3rd trimester when a few people, one of our friends within the friendship group that I was saying, Homebirths is a lot more normalised, and by now, lots of them have had 3 home births. Yeah. Back then, there was probably only a couple that had their first through home birth or whatever. Yeah. But one of them got to 42 and 1, I think, and she had a private midwife. And I was and that really changed my mindset, because I was just oh no, this can happen. Yeah. I was I hadn't really I was surely it's not going to be the case again. Yeah. So then I started having conversations with people and hearing more and more stories about people having their 3rd after 42 weeks, or on 42 weeks, or it was a lot were on 42 or 42 and 1. Yeah. And so it wasn't until, the later stages that I was I don't know why. I just thought this could be so different this time. Yeah. So so from what I understand, I think, is that you switched out to a private midwife at the very, very end. Yeah, after the deadline.
Yeah. And so before that, you'd sort of been developing this awareness that this other sort of option kind of exists, and this is sort of allowed in the private midwife world to go beyond 40, or not allowed, but support, midwives will support you, but you'd not really booked anyone in or given anyone the heads up kind of thing.
yeah, I think still I was just like trying not to dwell on it, and I hadn't really I'm a bit of like a cruiser in a lot of ways, and I think I was trying to go with the like, let's just go with it approach.
Yeah.
So I literally hadn't even like actually sat there and gone, okay, what will I do?
Yeah.
Until it was the 42 mark, or maybe like a day or two before.
Wow, yeah.
And then I was like, okay, this is getting real now. Like,
yeah.
It's a day or two away, and I got a few stretch and sweeps because I was like, yeah, really trying to like, okay, like, I want to be able to have, and my midwife is kind of like, come on, you can't have this maybe after 42 weeks yet. I'm like, I know.
Yeah.
And so then it was literally, I think that day that I'd ridden all the highs and lows of like thinking. I'd had so many little signs along the way too in those last few weeks. You know how you just get so many little niggles, and then obviously after the stretch and sweeps, they mentally threw me out a lot because I'd get like, I think after the first one, I had some like spotting and stuff, like nothing crazy, but then I also got some cramping or like some tightenings, and then the next day I lost my mucus plug. So I was like, oh yeah, like I did, and then it had just kind of like nothing again. Then a few days later, I got another one, and then the same kind of thing, just like, the cramping, all that kind of stuff. So it was really like, I really didn't enjoy, I was starting to get mentally over it in that last, I mean, as you do lots of times throughout the last trimester, but yeah, it was like really frustrating. So I think I was also like mentally, I just didn't want to think too much about it, and then until it kind of got to it. And even that night I remember like I didn't have that same feeling I did with Oscar where I was like really deflated. That night I just remember talking to my midwife at like 9 p.m. or whatever, and she kind of was like, just letting you know that like, if it's not by midnight tonight, it's kind of like that's it for Belmont or whatever, like in a nicer way.
Strange. It's like so
I know. And I was like, it's 9 p.m. There's not like I'm about to go to bed. There's nothing
3
happening.
hours.
So I was like, see ya. And it was like, you can write me out. Like I'm not going to be in active labor in the next hour.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So then my doula Sarah was kind of like, that day I'd had a chat with her. That's right. We had a phone call, and she was like, what are you thinking? And I said, I think the option, like we were just discussing it, Brad and I were discussing options, and it was kind of like, do we labor at home like most people do, and then, up to the last minute, and then just go and hopefully just have a baby as natural still but through John Hunter.
Yeah.
And then, or B, free birth, which Brad was just like, no, I can't do it. And then 3, we see if there's any potential of getting a private midwife for the last week or whatever it may be. So we discussed that, and we both agreed that, and it was cool because Brad was also like, I don't want to, like, because I thought he'd be like, let's just do the hospital thing. Like, a lot of people just do it, like just still can just use the birth suites and transfer. But I was like, I just can't imagine being in active labor and having to get in the car. And I was like, but I know that a lot of people do it, so I'm sure I can make it happen. But it's obviously not ideal. And I think more so it's not even like about so much of like wanting the achievement of having it at home again. And it was more just like, I don't want any of that intervention, and I don't want to feel backed against a wall. And I just like, it's really tarnished it for me. Like I just have no faith in the hospital system anymore, to put it frankly. And so we both said that our most comfortable option was if we were like, money's money, like if we can get a private midwife and that fulfills everything, we don't have to stress about timing, we don't have to worry about trying to get to the hospital, all that kind of stuff, and we still achieve what we want to achieve. And so then I was talking to Sarah, my doula, about that, and so then she kindly rang around. I think she talked to maybe like 5 different midwives that were all just like busy, and then one that she really loved, she was on leave, and but she was like, when I heard your story, I couldn't say no. So I'm so thankful for Helen. And anyway, so Sarah was kind of like, you need to kind of like I'd be ringing her tonight, and this was like maybe 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and I was like, oh, I just don't have the mental power right now. I just want to kind of go to bed for the night and just like see and if anything happens, and you know, and then I'll think about it fresh tomorrow. And so that was the way that I ended up doing it. And and then I contacted Helen like first thing in the morning, and then she came over like a couple of hours later, and she lives an hour away, so it was a big effort for her. And I guess I didn't realize how much of a paperwork process there was. So I was kind of like, you know, it's just like it's just like
person,
you're my midwife now. Like that's just what happens, right? So I didn't really understand the stress that like obviously Helen and Sarah were feeling, because I was like, it's all right, let's just sleep on this. I'll talk to you in the morning. But yeah, so Helen said she spent about 6 hours or so that day on this, just getting all the paperwork done. So that was when it became a changeover. So yeah, at 42 and 1, I guess it was, or 42.
Wow.
Maybe it was 42, and I had my group midwife had already booked my appointment into the hospital. And so I also had like, you know, to and fro conversations with her being like I was already like not intending on going to it. But then it was also a bit of a like awkward thing, because, you know, you don't want to be this rebellious person. It's like, yeah, I'm not doing that. So I was like lightly kind of like, yeah, so I have, and I didn't even know if I definitely got one booked in. Anyway, she was like, yeah, your appointment's tomorrow at 10 a.m. or something. I was like, okay, cool. Like I might not go. And so then I was also chatting about that with Sarah, and I was kind of like, I think I'd just not go to that one, and then think about it again on like Monday or something, give it the weekend. And then anyway, so then once we had Helen, it was just so nice because I didn't have to think about any of that anymore. Like the appointment got cancelled. I was now under someone else's care, essentially got discharged from that public system altogether.
Yeah.
And then that in hindsight, that threw out my post-natal care, which, I hadn't thought through that either. So there's all these little things that I didn't really, it was just all, it kind of just happened as it happened, and figured it out as we went.
Yeah. When did you actually go into labour with Archie?
So that Saturday we got Helen at 42 weeks, and then on 42 and 4 was the Wednesday. So essentially employed her for 4 days, which was good, because I was like, if I have this baby like the next day, and have to like fork out all this money
for one day
for like a few hours. So it made me feel a bit, it was awesome anyway, like whatever, money's money. But to be able to like, you know, feel like, you know, achieve what I wanted to achieve. So the backstory of that too is so on the Tuesday, Zara, my middle child, which we have talked about, so you already know her name, Zara.
It's late. It's all right.
I was like introducing my other daughter. Zara has been like we have co-slept with all our kids.
Yeah.
Always told ourselves we never would before kids. It's one of those things.
Yeah.
But anyway, that old chestnut. So anyway, so Zara sleeps with us, and she's like literally like sleeps having to like touch me. And it probably sounds like your son who always wants to know where you are.
Yeah.
So she like normally like either like kind of touching my face or like a boob or something. So we, in the few weeks before, like Brad's like, come on, we need to be doing something, because like how are you going to be sleeping with her and a baby? And I was like, no, I just feel like it'll just all play itself out. I feel like after you first, I just stress so much less about all that stuff. I'm like, I feel like we put way too much effort and stress on Oscar with all those things at this time. I'm like, now whatever, it'll sort itself. But anyway, so we did get a bed for her in the end, and she'd been actually really enjoying starting the night in there, and then at 11:30 every night she'd like wander down and come into bed with us. And so, which was like nice. Like it was like, I'm like, this is a bit of a transition. At least she knows she's got a space there. She does, you know, she'll sleep through one day. And so that night, on the Tuesday night, she came in like clockwork at 11:30. And
it's amazing that it's the way that works, right? It's like I feel like Murphy sleeps through the night now usually. Recently he's been like waking up though, and like just crying, and like but like it feels like it's the same time every night. I'm like, what is going on in your body?
I assume it's like some part of their sleep cycle or whatever. But yeah, it is funny. Like it's just like and if it's ever a different time, we're like, wow, she like lasted a bit longer. But so she came wandering in, and then I just kind of like scooped her into the bed and like went to just like roll over with her, and then I just felt like that my waters had broken, or like kind of remember the feeling, and then I was like, I need to check this out, so I like went to get up to go to the toilet, and for once she actually like rolled. It's like, this is the other thing that's so like, you know how the world works, it's like they just have these little instincts, but she normally like would be like, hey, Zara, just cuddle me, and she'd be like, no, and like even if I get up to go to the toilet, which was a lot when you're pregnant, and like often she'd even just kind of sit up and like wait for me, or like sometimes she'd even come to the toilet with me and stuff. But like that night she actually like rolled into Brad and just was like cuddled into him, and I was like, oh, this is cool. So like I felt it like trickling as I went to go to the bathroom, and so that was like my sign of that. And then the other factor is my mum passed away a year ago. Wow. And, oh, no, it's going to be tear up now.
Sorry, Mel.
No. But, yeah, so, like, literally Wednesday a year ago. But so it was 11:30 the Tuesday, and the next day it was going to be my mum's birthday.
Oh, fuck.
And so I was like, this is so insane. I'm literally going to have a baby on my mum's birthday. And so, I went into the toilet and I was just like, yep, definitely water's broken. I was like, Brad and Zara happy. I started feeling like little contractions, and I was like, yep, I'm on. And so I came out to the lounge room and I was like, I'll just, like, I think I even downloaded it on the spot. And I was like, I'll download that contraction up again, and like laid there. It's like, so
take it as it comes.
Yeah. It's like, I don't think I even have it anymore. And laid there and just started to like, the timing, I'm like, they're like consistent, but they were just pretty. And so again, I was doing the whole like, because both my doula and midwife were like, make sure after Zara's birth, you need to like make sure you call us or like let us know any little sign. But this has been weeks of like, I was like, hey guys, just letting you know I had this little, like, you know, it's just like, I feel like so much like, and I didn't call them with those, but like just little texts. So I was like, I'll just send a text and then not wake them up yet. And then I felt like it was ticking it off for me. And I was like, I'll call them when it progresses. So I sent them both. I sent Sarah my doula an actual message, just being like, just letting you know my water's broken. I'm getting some contractions. Nothing crazy, but I'll let you know if they amp up. Yeah. And then my midwife actually just sent a screenshot of the contraction app and with no context. And I was just like, I'll just send her that. And then I'll fill her in when I I'll call her later. And I was like, it must have been so weird because she wrote back straight away. And this was like, nearly midnight by this stage. And I was like, I was so thrown. I'm like, oh my gosh, sorry, I gave you no context. Oh yeah, by the way, so my waters broke. And then I started tying this. She was just like, okay, this is a good sign. I think I'm going to leave in a minute. And I was like, what? Like thinking, And I guess she's an hour away. So she wanted to be like, but I still think it's that thing where you just never quite know how long you've got or...
Totally.
And and then Sarah, and then I was like, I'll just go and let Brad know. So I was like, just so you know, I'm in labour, but like, I'll same again, I'll let you know if anything amps up. And it was just like, okay. And like, I'm like, you just stay there and keep Zara asleep. And then I had gone back out to like, and saw that my midwife had sent me another message being like, so I'm leaving in 10 minutes. If you want your pool, start filling up now. I'm like, oh, okay. So I like went back and I'm like, sorry. Just, it's like, hey again. So
I know what I said just a minute ago.
Because I was like, everyone will just kind of start to come, and then maybe we'll all fill up this pool together, and I don't know. So I went back and I was like, so Helen just said maybe you start. He's like, shoots up. He's like, yep, okay, because he was really bummed that like we'd hired a pool twice, right, and hadn't used it, and then this time it was I hadn't even hired one because I was like, why hire one again? Like, this is another lot of money that I'm just going to not use.
Yeah.
But then it was just worked out that Helen had one. So then we just had to buy the pool liner. So I was like, that's another thing of fate of like, you know, it's meant to be, maybe I do want to have it. And it did feel like something that I was like worried about, that I'd get to labour and be like, oh, I wish I did have a pool. So it was cool to like feel that as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Brad got up, and then I had my friend Sam staying with us, and she wanted to like be part of the birth and also just like be basically like our au pair in a way. Like, she was just amazing. Like, wanted to support in that postpartum period and stuff.
Yeah.
So then I went to her room and I was like, hey, just letting you know that I think I'm in labour, but if you could maybe just go lay with Zara because Brad's got to fill the pool up. So then she had that job of like laying in there. Beautiful. And being Zara's central touch. Just so she had someone to touch. She's like, I'm pretty sure she had my hand on my boob for a while there. I was like, yeah, that's all she needs.
Just any boob will do.
Just something to hold on to. So then by 1 a.m. both my midwife and doula arrived, and then the second midwife came a little bit after that. And it was really cool. So it was really empowering and special because I was just like, of course, this baby's just decided to wait for my mum's birthday. It was just, so that was really magical, and we all had a bit of a buzz of like, what are the chances? Like, if it was going to be, I guess it got to like the Monday or the Tuesday and that kind of thing, and I was like, surely not. Like, surely they're not going to share a birthday, because like when I first found out I was pregnant, I was like, that's close to like mum's birthday. So now we're going to have, and my dad's birthday is exactly the week after. So I'm like, here we go again. Like, it's going to be that whole family thing where it's like baby 1 week, mum the next. And then I was like, but surely, like, I think I even made a joke, like, if it was the same as Oscar, it would share mum's birthday. Shouldn't have made the joke. It's just like, here I am, 42 weeks and 4 days later.
Out of all of the days, right? All of the possibilities, and that's the day that is magic. Holy moly.
It was really cool. And I had some photos of mum like in the birth space, and I had this moment, Sarah, my daughter, was like, came in and you're just like I was just like so happy. So I'm like, how cool is this? Like 66 years ago, my grandma would have been like giving birth in a hospital. Like probably, like I was like, I need to check this with my grandma, but I'm like, I feel like it probably nearly the time where like the men didn't even go in, like the dads didn't even go in the room, we're very much like, you know, it would have been like up in stirrups, like we'll be getting this baby out for you. To like, my mum then like got induced with us all, and same thing where she just felt like, you know, she's just a body in a bed that just like they just forced this baby out of you. To like, I'm just here in my lounge room, like had these beautiful like, you know, fairy lights. It was just like had all these supportive women around me, and Brad obviously. And it was just like, so I had such a moment of just feeling so empowered, and obviously just that spiritual like connection of like, I felt like had that ancestral connection of like my mum and grandma, the family line of like women. And so it was really cool, and it was pretty like amazing, and it's just like what a story to tell that it out of all days it did land on this birthday. And I was because I had a few I was like I think it was one of those things too where I was trying to like tick all the boxes in the lead up, because I was like, you know, what's unfinished here? Like, do I you know, it's all those things where they say like if there's anything mentally unfinished, and I was like, maybe it's something about mum and like me not making time to grieve or all that kind of thing. So I was like doing all these little things, and then it even got to like a couple of weeks before, and I had this like, I'd been to the acupuncture, and she was like, I feel like there's something with your mum where like there's just, I don't know, she just was saying like it's something unfinished or like something that you need to sort out. And I'm like, I feel like I've like ticked every box with that. Like I feel like, you know, and then I left there and just got this overwhelming like emotion. And I was like, my mum was such a baby person, and I was like, maybe it's her like holding on to like this baby. I didn't know what gender it was at the time. And and like not wanting to hand it over.
Yeah,
and I was like, come on, Mum, like that's not fair. Like you've had your time, but I want him in my arms now.
Yeah.
So there was all these little like references along the way, I guess. So yeah, and then for him to come on her birthday, I was like, right, okay, you're gonna just want to have that like, strong connection to him, do you? Like that's just, so it was really beautiful, and now they'll forever be tied together in that way.
Yeah. So was Archie born in this pool finally?
Finally born in the pool. So I, did all the labouring and got to the point where I actually felt like I needed to throw up, and I didn't have that before, and I'm not someone that vomits, like even with morning sickness and all that kind of stuff. I'm just not really a spewer. So I was like, Brian was like, I didn't know that was a thing about the vomiting and stuff. And I was like, I did in my head, I was kind of like, oh, cool. Okay, this is a sign that I'm obviously entering active labour.
Yeah.
And so then my midwife prompted me then. It was like, if you want to be in the pool, like now's kind of the time. But it's still such a funny thing, isn't it, that you just always like second guess. Like I was like, but what if it's too early and I'm going to end up in this pool and then want to get out of it? Like, so I still had that thought, but I was like, oh yeah, I'll go with it. So got in the pool and I couldn't believe how good it felt. I was like, okay, now I understand why people love this so much.
Yeah.
Such a relief. Like it just felt, it was so warm, and I just felt, you just feel like, that feeling of being floating, but it's just like, it's like having a warm hug or something. Like it just felt so nice, and just lifted a lot of the kind of like weight of the contractions. But then like that side of me also was like, what if this slows things down? So I was like, I need to be I was like, I because with the others I was like really like have to be like bouncing and like swaying and like, all that kind of stuff. But I moved around a lot in the pool, and did like lunging, and like I was leaning over, and I don't know, just kind of seemed to do little random circles and stuff around the pool. And then I felt like it started to get to a frustrating point this time, which I didn't feel with Zara. And I guess maybe part of it could have been because I felt like I was really just like, everything just like stayed in the zone with Zara, and I felt like everything progressed really well. And then for that active labour just was really quick, like once my waters broke, whereas this time I felt like I was, like it felt slower, that active labour. And it ended up being 2 hours, 45 minutes, I think. So I did a bit of like, I feel like I had a bit of a cry at one stage, and a bit of like get out of me. And then it was really, but I really enjoyed the water part of it. And then I felt towards the end though that I was like, I need some like gravity help or something. So I stood up and did a couple of sways standing up, and my midwife was kind of like, get back down if you want to got this baby in the pool. And but anyway, I feel like it helped. I felt like I just needed like something just to like shift it down a little bit further. And then a few more frustration and contractions, and then he even did the thing where like I was like, oh yes, finally, like got that Chinese burn sensation where I knew it was his head. And then coming out, and I was just like, really like, like such a bit of a vocal roarer. And then I hear my midwife go, yep, so his head, the head's just popped back in, but that's all good. And I was just like, sorry, what? Like, I remember just being so deflated, and it was just like the last thing I wanted to hear. And in hindsight, I've heard that that's a good thing too, because it helps, like, stretch your perineum and all that kind of stuff. Like, but it was definitely not what I wanted.
Because your mind doesn't immediately go to like the most logical, rational thing, because you're like in labour land. You're like,
I know. I was just like, get this head out. That's all they wanted.
Mean? It's going back. Like,
yes. And it's like, that the head's just like end game. You're like, head is the hard part, and then I feel like once that's out, you're sweet.
Everything else comes.
Yeah. So I couldn't. I was so deflated. But anyway, it came out like a contraction or two later. And she was awesome at like prompting me too. So his head came out, and I like kind of sat out for a bit, and then even prompted me like, okay, you need to like kind of get him out in this next one. And again, I didn't know gender. I'm just referring to him now. But and even like prompted me to catch him, which I hadn't done with the other two. And so I got the water birth and being able to actually like hold him, which was really full in my eyes, being able to like lift him up and bring him to my chest myself, which was different to like the I think probably Brad helped get Oscar out, but then like Zara dropped on the floor.
Yeah.
So it's like a bit more, it felt like a bit more like I had control of the situation.
There was a pillow, Zara.
Yeah. Just for those listening, I swear we had it nice and safe. It wasn't tiles.
Definitely not.
But yeah, so it was really cool to like actually like have that power of lifting her up and lifting him up, and putting him on my chest, and I just said thank goodness, because I was just like, there's so many things. I think it was it was my most emotional delivery too. Like Zara felt more of a buzz and like, oh my gosh, what just happened? And like that kind of thrill, and this time felt so emotional because of, I guess, how it all panned out, with like how it got there. Being able to still have a home birth after 42 weeks was so empowering. Obviously being Mum's birthday, and then having like Sam joined by that point too, so she got to witness the birth. And so I had 4 women around the pool with me and Brad, and and also just it had been such a long ride. And then also I felt like that active stage felt longer and harder this time. And it turned out he was my biggest baby, so that probably played a part too. Yeah. But still had vernix, and as everyone, like my midwife and both midwives and the doula all said that night, was like, there's no sign of like him being looking overcooked or like he was just totally a normal baby, and like a bit heavier, but people have those kind of weight babies at 38 weeks. So you just never know. But so and then the other part of it too that Helen kept reiterating was that at some stage during my pregnancy in the scans, I showed up as having a velamentous cord insertion. And then I got some later scans and they were like, it's fine, like nothing to kind of be concerned about there. And then when the placenta came out, she was like showing me, and she's like, you do have that insertion. So if you had been induced and they, if they broke your waters manually and then they accidentally like kind of got the placenta, like that's such a game changer. Like it ends up being like an operation or whatever it is to remove it. So it's just like so amazing, and just really reinforced that like the difference of how the situation could have been, allowing it to naturally happen in comparison to like fronting up to that hospital system and being told that they need to kind of do it all, get it all moving, and potentially adding more risks and things to me, just like allowing it happen at home. So.
I could say so much to that, but I think all I will say is like, what stories, like when I reached out to you, I had no idea that you had 3 amazing stories, and like with Archie and your mum, and like just like holy moly. And Archie's only like little, like you're still in your like your 4th trimester. I think he's 6 weeks on Wednesday in a couple of days time. And it feels like a lifetime ago already. But yes, I think that's part of the 3rd child thing, that life goes on really quickly. Is that like the biggest thing that you've noticed going from 2 to 3 then?
I was really lucky. Like I really took the first 2 weeks really slow, and utilized Brad being on paternity leave because he just got the government 2 weeks, and then having my friend Sam here was such a savior. And I literally, so when he took the kids out, I could literally like as in the older 2, he'd go and take them to the park or whatever. And then I was able to just like spend pretty much the 2 weeks just around the couch, and I could just like hold Archie, feed him, just be able to like have all that skin to skin time, and Sam would like bring me in like food and all that kind of stuff, which was like so amazing. So I really like relished that. And then it literally was like the day Brad went to work was like, it was like I just had to switch, and I was like, right, okay, back. It was like lunchbox duty, drop-offs. Like it was just like, back into the swing of it. And and then I reckon from then it's just like I just spend the day getting in and out of the car. Yeah, so I think it's just the balance, and I think too the balancing of like the attention between the three, but having just like more to kind of more needs. And like they're both constantly like, I'm hungry, I need this, I want this, and so I think it's just more the juggle of like the sharing the attention. But so far I'm like he's the easy one, like the babies just kind of fit in. It's not until he's older that he'll add to the arguments. And
well, that's definitely happening with Frankie and Murphy. I feel like I just spend the whole day umpiring, stop hitting each other, stop throwing at that, why did you do that? That's all I say to people too. I'm like, oh, it's the other two that are like the tricky ones. It's not to do with him entering the world. It's just they just sit like that. It's just like Archie's good. It's the other two are the problem.
The beautiful thing about that is they do it for like another 10 years or something, right?
Yeah, right. I try to tell myself.
Siblings ever stop fighting? I don't know.
I try to tell myself that one day I'm going to have so much time, and I'm not going to have to tell them to do things, and I'm going to, I've been really craving exercise lately, but I just don't have time to really exercise now. And I keep saying to myself recently that like one day I can exercise the whole freaking day if I want. Like this doesn't, like 10 years, 18 years, whatever you want to call it. Like in reality, it's not actually that much time, and it goes by so quick. It sounds like Oscar's already at in prep or whatever now, but Murphy's starting next year. And like we've been going to the little orientation things, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. And so like when he's annoying now because he asks 100 times for food every day, and it's like, I literally just fed you. But, when he's annoying, I am trying really hard to be like, oh, like you're just little, and like just a second ago you were this little baby that I held in my arms, and like it's just you really have to check yourself and check in, because you can get swept up with life like so quickly. Like that's that's what life is, like doing something all the time. But they're not little
you
forever.
do hear they say when they start school it goes really fast, and I already feel like Oscar just started like as you say, he started like a pre-kindy thing only last term. And before that he was only going to daycare like one day a week. And I reckon it's just sped up. Like I'm like, how is it? Like and even like for today I knew that it was coming, but it's just like, oh, it's like it's already the Monday that it's on.
That
like
you
it's
selected,
like it's just like I feel like I just even can't keep up myself with the day. Like it's just the days are flying. And for Archie to already be like nearly 6 weeks, it's mind blowing as well. It like seemed like yesterday that I was still like, okay, any day now. And now he's already 6 weeks old, and I'm already that person that's already got a baby that I used to look at being like, that's going to be me soon. Like I'll have a newborn, and I think it just goes faster.
Absolutely.
Faster.
Well, I have no doubt that your stories are gonna like help so many women that listen. I think like when going into home birth, like it's this whole sort of world that you don't, like most people like are not, like they don't have any awareness of before they're pregnant, and then to learn everything, I just like that's quite unfair. And I think you've got some really valuable information in your stories, and I'm just like so grateful for you taking your time tonight, like with your little baby and Zara, who's obviously got somebody else's body to touch.
No, I've got till 11:30, remember? She'll be in soon. I just get a couple of hours to myself to start the night now, and then she comes in, and so now I have Archie and Zara and Brad all like in the bed generally at one time. I get so much space. But just saying that before you wrap it up, I ended up like, I think take home messages for like home birth is like not even so much about like achieving having a birth at home, because I know that like people like I've had comments before of people being like, I wouldn't want to clean the mess up, like so much mess, blah blah. And I'm like, there's tops and like you put things down for that measure. But anyway, but it's more just like changing the perspective that we are literally like meant to have babies, like we're built to have babies, and just somewhere along the way we've made that a scary process. And all like I remember as a kid always just thinking like all you ever heard was like, oh my gosh, the pain of birth. Like it's just always, and I think my biggest thing was just like you can tolerate pain, like you can, it's like just a process and you forget about it in a few hours, and it's like something that you can kind of control and be like really educated through. And just I think the thing that makes it painful is people get so scared. Like you get so scared because you're like, what's this thing hurting me? Like something's going to happen here. And like it's because we've been told all these scare tactics and fearful stories. And so it's not even that I'm against people having births in a hospital. I'm against how they treat births in a hospital, and how they try to take over the situation and make you feel like you've got to do things that that are kind of going against what your natural instincts and body can allow you to do. And my last little thing with that is like after Archie, I actually had a bit of blood loss, and I guess this is back on the home birth wagon though, was that I sat there, I delivered the placenta, all that kind of stuff. The afterbirth pains kicked in really quickly this time, which is always a joy. But I ended up, my midwife was kind of like, they were prompting me to go and have a shower. This was like kind of post everything, and once the cord had been cut and all that kind of stuff. And then I got really like faint, and they were like, oh no, lay back down. And so my body doesn't seem to cope well with blood loss. It wasn't that I lost heaps and heaps and heaps. It was like 600 mils or something.
Yeah.
But it was enough that I needed to get some fluid. And my midwife ended up being like, I think we'll get the paramedics because, you know, they can put the line in you better. My blood pressure was a bit low, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so still in like the safety of my home, or like the comfort of my home, I'll say, I was still in really safe hands and could get support from the paramedics, or even just my midwife could have done it too, but she was kind of like, you know, they've got more fluid, their fluid's more in date or whatever, because I think there's a bit of a shortage of fluid around here at the moment.
Yeah, actually.
And also she was just like, I just didn't want to, I was just worried that because your blood pressure was low, I didn't want to struggle getting the line in, but she ended up doing it herself anyway. But yeah, so they came and there were these two guys and they were the loveliest people, and they were like, this is like such a nice job for us, like getting to like come here and do this. This is a really like positive experience for us when we're exposed to so many things and in their line of duty. But it was just like, I was still just like, I wasn't like, there was no fear around it. Like I wasn't scared. No one was scared or anything. I just needed some, like I think they even put an oxygen thing on me and stuff too, just to like help amp me up a bit again.
Yeah.
And so I still didn't have to like, and they offered if I wanted to be transferred to the hospital or was just happy, feeling comfortable at home. And I was like, oh yeah, and I'm comfortable here. Like I'd rather stay here than go and spend the rest of the day in a hospital bed. And I was fine. Like I was fine within maybe an hour or two, and could get all the care that I needed and still not have to like be uncomfortable and and away from, or like, you know, having to throw a baby in the car or in the ambulance or anything like that. I was just, I think that's just, I felt like I wanted to add that little thing of like things can happen, but there's still so much support and you can still feel so like comfortable within that home birth environment. And it's not like you're just literally like, it's not like you're in a bush somewhere with no resources around you.
Yeah. Well, like I always make a point whenever I'm sort of telling someone the basics, I guess, about home birth is that they carry medication for postpartum hemorrhage and things like that. It's not like they're just rocking up with their bare hands. And I mean, like that's what the kind of the approach you want them to have initially, but you want that other stuff usually as well. Like just in case, like, you know, it's like birth is, as your stories are, birth is unpredictable. You can't like predict them. There is like that. There's risk with everything in life because life is unpredictable. But you know, midwives are so educated. Like to become a private home birth midwife, you have to do so much more work than the midwives that are on the ward in the hospitals. And I feel sad that that's not really recognised. You know, home birth midwives are kind of like seen as these, you know, rebels that sort of fly under the radar and doing this weird stuff and, you know, not going with the status quo. But like they're actually really, really educated and highly, highly skilled, and they have access to things like, medication for postpartum hemorrhage, or like, to put up an IV for, you know, extra fluid or whatever you need. So, I think that's a perfect example.
I think midwives are amazing. And, even the ones in the hospital, it's like overall you can just tell they're backed against the wall too. They're just so inundated, busy, and then often you see there's the conflict between like what they value and feel comfortable with, but they still have to align with this system. So I totally get why there's more and more people becoming private midwives, because what a way to be able to try and escape that, but then essentially putting yourself under other harder work in, you know, trying to fit that into your life is hard. That commitment of a private midwife, but it's amazing, and I totally appreciate it all.
Ditto. Well, thank you so much, Mel.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me. My first little podcast feels so important.